a new Windows thing or something, because I really like it. We can just get one of those rugs like they put in the water. Right? Yeah, I'll ask for a rug. Because we are all over the place. Either that or don't have chairs like this. Have chairs like that.
Ross, I want you to see how much it is so that you'll know that it's not a buyout. 10, 20, 34. Tell the mayor he owes me $8.
The special meeting of the Annapolis City Council on Monday, September 24th, 2018 will be called to order at 7:03. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation given by Alderman Savage, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. As the council gathers here to make laws affecting the people of Annapolis, I ask you to lift your heads, to open your eyes, and open your hearts. Let us remember that we are all connected by our common humanity and by our common love for Annapolis. Let that unite us. Let that prevent us from closing our hearts and seeing each other as opponents. I, for one, have forgotten to do this recently. I want to take this as a moment to reaffirm my commitment to doing so. In gratitude and in love, let us work together for a better Annapolis.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Buckley?
Here.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Here.
Alderman Leanne?
Here.
Alderwoman Kendall?
Here.
Alderwoman Finley?
Present.
Alderman Rodriguez?
Here.
Alderwoman Henson?
Here.
Alderman Savage?
Present.
Alderman Arnett?
Present.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the first item on the agenda.
The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended to remove and postpone or add. I think Alderman, are there any Alderman requests at this time? Alderman Henson.
I would move to remove from the first reader calendar the R4118.
Yeah, I have that for sure. Yep. Remove that, Cindy. Thank you. Anybody Anybody else? Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is ceremonial items.
Sorry,
Oh,
I'll take
I'm
the
sorry.
Alderman
Yeah,
Tierney?
I'd like to remove on second reader, 02118 parking fund appropriations, if I may.
Alderman Arnett?
Can we ask why?
I don't I just have a comment. Was it reviewed by Finance Committee?
Yeah,
It
I think
was?
so. It's basically, as I understand it, maybe the city manager, but it's to make us illegal. So that we can actually properly transfer funds, but
I just don't remember ever discussing.
We'll get some clarification from the city manager, please.
Yes, this came up during the budget. It was reviewed by the Finance Committee. Currently, every year in the city has been transferring approximately $2.5 million from the parking fund to the general fund, and then from the general fund to the transportation fund, which is not a permitted use in the city code, because the parking fund under the city code as it stands may only be used for parking. And so this ordinance allows the city council to transfer money from the parking fund for any other lawful purpose, which is what you are currently doing and have been doing for many, many years, and it was reviewed at length in front of the Finance Committee during the budget deliberations.
Okay, the staff report, I misunderstood it as it was supposed to be used, the excess revenue was supposed to be used for transportation-related things like, which we need, like signage and circulator, etc. So I didn't understand the staff report. So if it's what you talked about at the Finance Committee, as far as what's being done and continue to do it, and you need to codify to do what you've been doing, then
Yes.
I withdraw my
Yes, that's what it
request.
thank you.
Alderman Payan?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move that R 4618 be removed from the consent calendar.
Okay. I don't think you have to second it, right? You can remove anything, right? Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, that's in it? Okay. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is ceremonial items, beginning with a city council citation for the 20th anniversary of Pinkies West Street Liquors.
We go to...
Mr. Chair, did we approve the agenda as amended?
Oh, sorry. No. Yes. Do we approve
Well,
the
I would
agenda
like
as
to say
amended? All
aye
those in
also.
favour say aye.
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 Against?
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. Thank you. And this- Just going to call you up as I go through this. So thank you. Tonight we celebrate several significant milestone anniversaries of businesses located in our city. It's my honour to recognise their outstanding contribution to not only our economy but to our community. These businesses represent what success looks like when small, independent businesses find their niche and through excellent customer service grow, sometimes into international companies, like our first honoree. I would first like to ask Peter Trogdon and his team to come forward from Wims Plath. Now I've got a script here, so I'm going to have to keep reading. For 90 years, Wims Plath have been headquartered in our city and now call Esport its home. It's one of the oldest marine companies in the United States, and now it is an international company with hundreds of dealers worldwide. Congratulations, Peter, to you and your team.
So Mayor, today I brought with me the new owner.
Okay.
New owner of Region Flat.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, second, with only 70 years under its belt, 70 years is pretty impressive, I would like to ask Bill Griffin and his Faucets crew here tonight to come forward. As one of the original exhibitors at the Annapolis Boat Show, you'll be honoured at this year's show for your outstanding commitment to the boating community. We would like to thank you and for your decades of operations here in the city on the waterfront. And thank you so much. Third, and this one is particularly special to me, I would like to ask Christina, Michael and Brandon from Middleton's Tavern to come forward. For 50 years, Middleton's Tavern has not only been providing outstanding food and drink to our locals and visitors, but also has been hiring our city's best and brightest to work in its tavern. People like me. I'm just joking about that. My first job ever in Annapolis was at Middleton's Tavern. I got this job after sailing to town here 25 years ago. And if you can make it 25 years more, I've written some jokes in here for me, then you should be set for 5 more decades of service. So thank you to Middleton's Tavern. Congratulations. Thanks, guys. Cheers. And also celebrating 50 years is the Maryland Federation of Art, this city's oldest art studio located on State Circle. I would like to ask Joanna. No, Joanna. Oh, sorry. Joanna's much better looking. This volunteer-based non-profit organisation does an outstanding job promoting awareness, appreciation, and support to our vibrant artist community. I hope you have a fabulous Collector's Choice event next month that helps you to continue your service for another 50 years. Thank you so much. Celebrating 35 years of service is that iconic pink building on Pinkies on West Street. They know me pretty well in there. I would like to ask Bill to come forward. Bill, thank you for your family, for your many years of service. Where's Paul? Paul's not with you? And your outstanding selection and commitment to customer service. Cheers to many, many more years of success. Thank you very much. Also celebrating 35 years of service are our friends at Carrolls Creek Cafe, home of some of the best cream of crab soup in the world. I would like to ask Jeff and Richard to please come forward. Thank you, both of you, for your amazing menu, and even more so, your incredibly dedicated staff. As a restaurateur, I know how hard it is to succeed in this business and to keep such exemplary staff on board. I would also like to thank you for your upcoming anniversary event on October 28th, where you will award 7 $5,000 grants to deserving local non-profits organisations in honour of this milestone anniversary. Thank you for everything you do for the community. Thank you. And lastly, I would like to ask Leanne Irwin to come up for your citation honouring your 25 years of service. 20? Okay. Of Shiatsu for Health. Your talented hands and those of your staff have brought many, many years of healing and relaxation to our citizens, and we appreciate your holistic approach to balancing the mind, body and emotion and spirits of our community. I could do with a massage right now, that'd be good. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
So the triathlon isn't getting something?
And one more, sorry, a special citation tonight to Lisa Fontaine and Craig Harrison. Guys out there? All right, cool. This dynamic duo met with me this spring when I had this crazy idea to have the first annual Annapolis Sailors Triathlon. Because of them, hundreds of athletes, both local and from around the region, joined us just before dawn to jump into Spar Creek, bike to Greenbury Point, and then run across our city, including, for the first time since 9/11, through the United States Naval Academy. Your professionalism and excellent reputation is one key reason why the Academy opened up its gates to our event. Next year, this event will be even bigger. Thank you so much. And Mark was in the event too. Mark did. Well, that's why. And Fred, you're the one who had the bike route for us.
My teammate. I didn't know you were team one.
Yeah. You beat Ross's team.
My team was at happy hour at Carrolls.
I just found out that Sheila worked at Middleton's as well. I'm not going to say when. So we came all the way down to the bottom, so I did all this, and I'm just going to go next to this. So let's try, that's the last one there. Forces is done. Okay, petitions and reports, should we like? Yeah. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is petitions, reports, and communications.
Alderman Henson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Housing and Human Welfare Committee did meet on September 18. Before I get to what was before the committee, everyone who's not a member of the committee should have one of these folders on your dais. It's from the Anne Arundel County Health Department. At our June meeting, we had a really informative presentation from them. One of the things in there is the health report card for the county. It goes over some stats. It does have some places where it references Annapolis specifically. One of them is that Annapolis is one of the 5 areas in the county that has a greater than average household receiving supplemental nutrition assistance benefits from the federal government, from the Department of Agriculture. Also in there is the information we discussed about the opioid overdoses here in the city of Annapolis. It looks like we are on par with where we were year to date in 2017, but the shift in the dynamic is that now 71% of the residents are Annapolis city residents, whereas last year only 54% of the overdoses were attributable to people that were city of Annapolis residents. So they haven't yet identified what's the cause of that shift, but they have identified that difference in data. They also were kind enough to give to us a report on some legislation that was before the committee. We did review O2218, the polystyrene ban. They gave us a report with the health implications on polystyrene, that it was linked to lymphatic cancers and a few other things that were really health hazardous. So we had the opportunity as a committee to review it for its implications on public health, and we did recommend it favorably. We also took up the adequate public facilities ordinance. We as a committee decided that it would perhaps be best for a work session so that we could have the benefit of having the dialogue from the other committees as well, so that we were making sure we were amending that with a purpose and with a plan and a goal, and that was goal-driven in mind. The next meeting of the Housing and Human Welfare Committee will be on October 16th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. Oh, we also had the opportunity to review the appointment of Mr. Andre Atkins to the Board of the Housing Authority. On our agenda for tonight is an amendment to the Ethics Code, which puts it in line with state code, where it requires us to have Housing Authority members submit to the same public disclosures that we submit to as alderpersons. So we did ask Mr. Atkins all the questions that would bring him in line with what would be on a disclosure, even though we didn't have the document completed, but we did solicit that information so that we could be informed when making our recommendation. Thank you.
Yes.
I see a brochure about training, Alderwoman Henson. Is this still open to the public? Because I think there's one more, well, I guess all the dates are gone then. September 19th is expired. Will there be other opportunities for residents to get the training on how to use Narcan?
This is kind of where my 2 committee assignments overlap. I'm fortunate to sit on the Public Safety Committee that Alderwoman Pendell-Charles chairs, and we've had presentations from our own Office of Emergency Management, and they offer that training as well. So I know that it's something that if the county has offered all that they will for the year, that the city residents still have the opportunity to do that through OEM.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a good announcement
Alderman Pan.
for anybody who...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Audit Committee met this morning and had a very, very good meeting. We decided to do a number of things. Number one, it's obvious to us that the ex officio members probably need to be voted off the committee. We need to change the legislation to do that. The reason being that their departments may in fact be audited at some point, and the objectivity that we would like may not be there. That isn't to say that they will not send personnel to represent their various interests when we meet. I would fully expect them to do that. There was a suggestion that we agreed to look into for fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. We will be hearing back from the city manager regarding that within 2 to 3 months. One of the things that we really need to do is to make sure that the city itself follows its own code when it comes to finances. Every year, each department is to submit information by January the 15th. That simply has not happened, at least to my knowledge, and I don't think the council's ever gotten copies of what we are supposed to get copies of. That needs to change. The committee has also directed the city manager to issue an RFP for auditing a particular department, at least so we understand what the general cost will be. And at that point, that's when we'll come begging by the mayor's office and looking for some money that we were told was in reserve for this purpose from last year's budget. It was carried over, however, not labeled as such at this point. I believe it's in the general fund, but we'll get to that at a later date, Mr. Mayor. And we also felt that it was important for each department to set goals and take measurements, success measurements, measurements of professionalism, the way they run the department, and we need to discuss that further, but at any rate, it was a very robust, a modest agenda, but a robust discussion this morning, and very pleased with the progress we're making.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Environmental Matters Committee meeting from last month. Let's see, we talked about the phone prohibition, the phone ban, and basically now that we're not tied to the county's legislation, which was vetoed, we made a number of improvements to it, which I look forward to discussing with colleagues, hopefully this next meeting coming up here, first meeting in October. And we also talked about Maryland Energy Administration grant, which our Office of Environmental Policy has secured for $55,000 to do some energy efficiency upgrades in the city. And we're next meeting on October 17th at 3 p.m.
Alderman Finlayson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Rules and City Government Committee met on September 11th. We took up two pieces of legislation, 018, adequate public facilities. We had Special Assistant Alex Aknovich from the Board of Ed to give us the statistics on the capacity of our schools. And we, actually, I think I just heard Alderwoman Henson say she's making a request for a work session on the adequate facilities legislation, and I would concur that that would be appropriate. We did postpone action on that legislation. The other piece of legislation was 014-18 development review process. We had hoped to address that legislation with the attorneys, the legal attorneys who were involved in the case against the city along with our staff, and because of the holiday we were not able to meet. So action on that legislation is postponed until our next meeting, which is on Tuesday, October 2nd at 4 o'clock here in Chambers. Thank you.
Alderman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Transportation Committee did not meet September 13th because we thought we were having a hurricane. And so our next meeting is October 11th. And I do ask that the Forest Drive Esport sector study be added to the next agenda for review, if possible. Thank you.
Alderman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next meeting of the Public Safety Committee will be held on Monday, October 1st, 6 p.m. in Council Chambers. Thank you.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is comments by the general public.
During comments by the general public, the public may speak on any item not scheduled for public hearing tonight. Legislation scheduled for public hearing is O-29-18, lease of Truxton Park to Kayak Annapolis LLC. O-33-18, commercial recycling. O-35-18, pruning of trees. O-36-18, public peace noise prohibition. O-37-18, ethics code financial disclosure updates. O-40-18, vacant non-residential building registration. Okay. Our first speaker is Donna Jefferson. Please come forward. State your name and address. Thank you.
Donna Jefferson, 13 Southgate Avenue, Annapolis. And I'm not sure if I signed the right sheet of paper. But I'd like to talk about the no discharge zone, R4618. And I'm not sure, listening to your discussion, if R4618 is going to be talked about today?
I think you can.
Yes?
It's not a public hearing, so you can talk about it. Yep. Yep.
Okay. The house I lived in is a house my grandparents built in 1929. We're at the end of Southgate Avenue. So needless to say, I've been living here for a really long time. I'm a member of Spot Creek Conservancy. I'm also a business owner in Annapolis. I'm the founder and owner of Chesapeake Family Life magazine. And I've seen what's happened to Spot Creek, and I'm part of a team, volunteer team, that goes out every week to test the water. We take samples from Spot Creek at 10 different locations. It is tested by the Anne Arundel Community College Environmental Center under the direction of Dr. Tammy Demansky. We test May through September. The things we test are salinity, dissolved oxygen, pH, enterococcus, which is bacteria, total suspended solids, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Those are the basics. We test more things too. We post the results on spotcreek.net. We also post them on numerous social media sites. And there is, and you don't know this, but there is a site called Operation Clearwater. It's through Anne Arundel Community College. It has the results from 41 different centers that are tested around Anne Arundel County. I can tell you that the state of Spot Creek is not great. On a weekly basis, there are at least 2 sites that almost always have elevated levels of bacteria that are unsafe for any sort of recreation. And if it rains, pretty much all of Spot Creek, except the very center of it, has elevated levels of bacteria. And we can tell when a boat dumps its sewage. Most recently, it was off of Cheston Avenue, and you can see the bacteria levels spike. And even though there might be a week that goes by where the levels are good, that doesn't mean the water is clean. There are also elevated levels of phosphorus and nitrogen, which means there could be algae blooms or excess growth in the creek, not good growth, because there's no subaquatic vegetation. If you guys ever see any, please let me know. That'll be like a banner day for us. But what happens when this vegetation dies is it sucks up all the oxygen. So that means Spot Creek is oxygen depleted. That means no grass grows, there's very limited fish or any kind of critter that live in the creek. Our results are conducted by Chesapeake Biolabs and Solomons, as well as at the community college. So it's not a bunch of volunteers doing this. These are well-respected sources. And as I said, it's been 3 years, so we can chart the progress that we've made. We've recently had several multi-million-dollar projects where we've cleaned up the reduced runoff, and it has made it better. It's not totally great by a long shot. So we are in support of the no discharge zone, which is Resolution 4718. We're also in support of Resolution 4618 to enforce the rules that are already in place for stormwater management. And if anybody would like any further information, I'm happy to give that to you. We have tons and tons of data. I thought that probably I would bore people to death if I gave you the data. I also have pictures of my dad in Spot Creek in 1935. So I can show you the difference that it looks like from today and in 1935. And I would like to see it look like 1935 again.
Alderman Payon?
Ma'am, what was your address again?
13 Southgate.
Alderman Pindell Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Jefferson, do you have copies of your testimony tonight? I personally would like to see it, and I'm sure my colleagues may as well.
Yes, one is all marked up, but I'm happy to leave it, or I can email it to you, whichever.
That'd be fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Really, and again, if anybody wants more information, I'm happy to give it to you.
Alderman Arnett?
Do you test by the mayor's boat where he makes his son swim?
I wouldn't swim sometimes when he lets his son swim.
I'm putting my kids at risk to make a point.
You really are. Generally, if you're right in the middle of the creek, you're okay. But I would not, it's the shallow areas that are, and the areas where stormwater is running right into the creek. I mean, you look at all the street ends that we have, that the rainwater runs right into the creek. That's bad for the creek.
Alderman Tierney?
Yeah, very quickly, hi, good night, hello. Are you testifying as an individual or,
For Spot Creek Conservancy?
you are speaking on behalf of Spa Creek Conservancy?
Yes.
Great, okay, good,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman
There-
Payon?
There are a lot of very smart people who grew up on Southgate Avenue, believe me. Hey.
Alderman Savage?
Yeah, thank you for coming out. I'll be in touch because I would like to see the data that you have, and
Sure.
maybe we could see if we could set up a time for you to come to Environmental Matters Committee to present to the committee.
Yeah, I can do a bang-up PowerPoint.
Yes?
Is that it?
Thank you for everything you do, Donna. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jack Turner. Please come forward, state your name and address.
Good evening, City Council, Mr. Mayor. My name is Jack Turner. I live at 1091 Cedar Ridge Court, Annapolis. And I am here for, one was the no discharge resolution 47-18, and the second is the stormwater management resolution 46-18. I think Donna did a great job of describing things, so I'm actually going to read a letter that was given to me on behalf of Severn River Association, of their president, Lynn Rockenbach. She couldn't be here tonight, so I will just read these two short letters that she wrote in support of both of these resolutions. As far as the no discharge zone goes, I'm just going to read verbatim here. This message is to inform you that the Severn River Association supports Resolution 4718 concerning the establishment of a no discharge zone for the Annapolis waterways. We hope the City of Annapolis will join Anne Arundel County in supporting this effort to designate certain waters as no discharge zones, in which the discharge of vessel sewage, whether treated or not, is prohibited. We have found that many people from other areas already believe that Annapolis waters are a no discharge zone, and are surprised that such a place has not joined other popular boating cities in this effort to keep our waterways free from human waste. Others have invested money in sewage treatment for their boats out of concern for the Severn and other waterways, but do not realize that most of these systems treat only the bacteria and not the nutrients, that nitrogen and phosphorus that Donna mentioned. Excess nitrogen and phosphorus are key elements contributing to the impairment of the Severn and other Anne Arundel County rivers. Most of this comes from the land, but removing what comes from our many boats will certainly improve our waterways. Please take advantage of Back Creek Conservancy's efforts to apply for a no discharge zone for county waters and let the boaters of the world know that Annapolis cares about clean water. Support Resolution 47-18. And this is for Resolution 46-18. I'm not exactly sure what the title of that one is, but this message is to inform you that the Severn River Association supports Resolution 46-18 concerning the application of the City of Annapolis stormwater regulations. The Severn River is suffering from nutrients and sediment coming from its creeks. Stormwater management helps a great deal by slowing the speed of stormwater to prevent it from picking up new nutrients and sediment and allowing time for the stormwater to soak into the ground and either be used by the vegetation or filtered through the soil to remove excess nutrients. The Severn River Association supports redevelopment over new development, which removes trees that perform several important services for our environment, both for air pollution and water pollution, as well as wildlife habitat and human stress relief. Therefore, we support this bill's attempt to put more requirements on development, new or redevelopment. The Severn River Association also supports the application of this bill to any project that does not have a stormwater management plan approved before the effective date of this resolution. One project that has come to our attention, Esport Landing, does not yet have an approved stormwater management plan and should not be exempted from this resolution as its stormwater plan is inadequate. The Back Creek Conservancy is trying very hard to restore the headwaters of the creek, and this project, left as is, would soon require millions of dollars to be spent to restore the stream near the park behind the post office, which I assume is the Esport post office. Treating the stormwater adequately would avoid this expenditure. And for those who don't know, Severn River Association is a membership organization, so there are HOAs and communities. They have 75 communities that are part of the Severn River Association. They do advocacy, education, and restoration in the Severn River watershed. And then I can speak on my own behalf, but I think that's all I really have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Thank you. Anybody? No? Thank you. Next speaker is Rome. Please come forward, state your home address.
Hello, my name is Rome Zapparoni, and I'm the owner of the Annapolis Cigar Shop on 121 Main Street. And I was asked to come up here tonight. I wish I wasn't the first one speaking on this, because I don't usually do this kind of thing, but I'm here to talk about the bike lane and things like that, which I'm sure people have been talking about. More than being against the bike lane is, to me, is the way that it was done. On, I think, the Tuesday before the bike lane went into its starting phases, the mayor came in, and I heard that you said to my employee, I wasn't there unfortunately, don't yell at me, but here's what's going to happen. And I mean, just getting yelled at kind of gives you a message that we weren't, really warned about this or anything. And this is fall, when, we have to make our nut before we go into the winter. And this affects every business on Main Street. And I just think the way it was gone about, whether you're for or against the bike lane, there has to be some kind of a process where people get input that are impacted by this. And it doesn't seem to me that happened. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on people here, but there has to be a better way than this. And I also think it's a little bit of a waste of money with it being temporary. If we had provided the proper infrastructure and done it the right way through the city council, I believe maybe it could have been better. And I think you need a lot of things to have a city without cars or with limited car access and stuff. I've lived in Europe for years. I've lived in Italy. I've lived in Eastern Europe, and it's wonderful. But they have a different culture. They have a different mentality, and they definitely have a different infrastructure as far as their public transportation is concerned. A different attitude about how to use that, and we don't have that over here. And it would take years to train people to do that, I think. And another thing, I used to ride a bike downtown before I got my dog. We was 15 years old now, so it's been a while. But I used to ride a bike downtown all the time, and Main Street was always a place where I felt very safe riding a bike because it was plenty wide, traffic is slow, and there's some other streets that I thought, wow, bike lane would be nice because, traffic's whizzing by you and things like that. But not here. I always thought the bikes and I do like the plan of renting the bikes, that's fine. But I think the bikes and parking can coexist, and you don't have to get rid of one to have the other. And we can both, live together and bike and park and all that. And I guess that's it. But, hey, Miss Finlayson. Used to be my English teacher, great English teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Next speaker is Costas.
Mayor, City Council, I'm back here again to speak about the same thing, the issue of the disruptive processes that have damaged the city, in my view.
Sir Costas, just name and address for the record, please. Thank you.
Please, sir. My name is Costas Alexakis. I own O'Brien's Oyster Bar at 113 Main Street, and I'm directly affected by the trial that's been going on for the last several weeks. I'm reminded of going back to engineering school, and the first thing that we were taught was, first, identify the problem before you start solving it. Second, do no harm. And the third thing, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So here we are. I'm in Annapolis, a historical city. I invested in the city for that purpose, because it's a unique place. There's nothing like it. It's not Las Vegas, it's not New Orleans, it's not anything else. It's not New York, it's not Manhattan. This is Annapolis. This is the place where it's unique. The charm of Annapolis is its uniqueness and its historical character. And so while thinking about the problems of Annapolis, I talked to people and I discovered that there are two big issues. One is the flooding that occurs occasionally and now more often than before. And the second thing is the lack of parking, or the perception that there is no parking. And then suddenly we are facing this problem of less parking. In fact, half of Main Street parking has been removed. So I rise to speak in protest to this continuing damage being done to the city and its merchants, particularly those merchants on Main Street who are directly affected by the loss of street parking and also the installation of this counterintuitive bike path downhill on a small street, a bike path that goes nowhere except on Main Street. The barriers that separate the bike path from the rest of the road make it look like a perpetual construction zone. And that's very negative both to the character of the city and the historical identity of the city, but also for the businesses that surround the area. The removal of parking on Main Street, while it's only 36 parking spaces, creates the impression that the city is less user-friendly. And that grows to the existing impression that visitors of the city have, which is that Annapolis is hard to park. The perception of no parking snowballs into damaging the businesses that the city relies on to pay real estate taxes. The highest real estate taxes of the business area are down in that area. I pay $55,000 a year for the little restaurant in real estate tax to the city. The execution of this trial did not follow process, and therefore is not legally authorized. And in my view, it is illegal. The damage continues, and for no reason. I urge you to stop and restore Main Street to its former visitor-friendly charm.
Thank you, Costas. Next speaker, David Barker.
Good evening. My name is David Barker. I reside at 154 Quiet Waters Place in Beechwood Hill. I'm the chair of the Back Creek Conservancy, and I'm speaking tonight in favor of R 4718 no discharge zone for the purpose of supporting the establishment of a no discharge zone for Annapolis waterways. Thank you, sponsor Savage, and co-sponsors Arnett, Henson, Tierney, Rodriguez, Buckley, and Payon. And next thanks go to Kurt Riegel, who spearheaded the no discharge zone resolution by the Annapolis Environmental Commission back in late 2014. That was what got the Back Creek Conservancy involved. And there is today an NDZ application covering nearly all of Anne Arundel County's waters and Annapolis City's waters. Following the County Council's parallel NDZ resolution last week, Annapolis will soon be safely embedded in the nation's highest standards for sewage discharges from vessels. Make no mistake, the overwhelming majority of recreational boaters around here already practice these highest standards routinely by pumping out their onboard sewage at one of 59 public marinas in the county. Boaters have been the most active supporters of this measure, and we boaters thank you for your support.
Alderman Savage.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Barker. So I want to say just a really big thank you to the incredible effort, leadership that you've provided to get this application together. It is no small amount of work, and I know not only you, but your organization, Back Creek Conservancy, has contributed a significant amount of money towards this effort for the benefit not only of the entire city, but entire county. So we all owe you a great debt of gratitude, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barker.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, but I have to be honest with you. We have been propelled in this by the tremendous enthusiasm of people, both the maritime industry, boaters, marina operators, and environmentalists have all come together in such a remarkable way.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker is Bruce Chance.
Bruce Chance, 306 Bridle Path Lane, W.R. Chance Jewelry, 110 Main Street. I have 3 bicycles at home. I ride a bike for exercise. I've even had an accident on a bicycle on a bike path that had no cars on it, and no cars are allowed on it. I'm not against bikes. I'm not against bike lanes. I am actually for better bike lanes in Annapolis because there's a lot of streets that have a bike lane and then they don't have a bike lane. And it gets kind of scary in some of those areas, and those are areas that I like to ride in, and it's not Main Street. However, I am against the bike lane on Main Street. I'm against the way the experiment came about. I know it's not just about a bike lane. I know we have the cafe seating, and that's something that we want to take a look at. I know there's possible other things that we're trying to take a look at the same time that may not be as apparent. Because of this, though, the way that this came about, it makes me concerned about other future projects, especially the rebuilding of Hillman Garage. When will the public see the plans for this vital piece of infrastructure? We keep being told that it needs to be built, it needs to be torn down, we need a new one. We keep hearing that. Is there a plan? Has anybody seen plans for this new garage? Okay, it doesn't look like it. Sorry, I lost my place. We need the infrastructure built. We need it built for cars. We need it built for pedestrians. We need it built for bicycles. So please make that a priority. In cities such as Portland, Boulder, Burlington, and Asheville, mass transit and parking were built and improved before the bike lane expansion or any closure of any of the streets. These cities, as well as New York, are mentioned as examples of success on the bicycle fact sheet located on the front page of the city's webpage. After reviewing them, I found them quite a bit different than the city of Annapolis. Primarily, a lot of high-rises in these buildings, a lot of big bridges. Portland has a bridge that was built specifically for mass transit, for bicycles, and for pedestrians. It's a bigger bridge than any bridge we have around here other than the Bay Bridge, and they built that. I'm not sure we're able to do it, but infrastructure is important for these successes. And most of these cities have over 100,000 people living in them or working in them on a daily basis. Council, if you have not taken a look at these cities, it is on a sheet of paper that the city is pushing. I advise you to go and take a look at these cities, at least on Google. You can find them. Burlington, for example, one of the things that when you start looking, you find out, it offers 2-hour free parking in all of its garages, the first 2 hours. Its full day in one is $10 to park all day. The others are $8 all day. A little bit different than what we have. They charge $1 at most of the parking meters, 40 cents at some of them, and I think it was $1.50 if you use the smart app. So you get charged a little extra for that. So I ask you, before we plan a bike lane or remove parking from Main Street and City Dock, that we build infrastructure to support this change. You might find more people support it if we are building and we have a plan. Annapolis is not a European city. We are who we are. We are Annapolis. Visitors come to Annapolis to share in our historic city. We love talking to them about it. Mayor and City Council, please protect our city, its charm, and its character. Thank you.
Bruce, Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will say that the mayor has publicly stated that he thinks we need to look at moving up Hillman on the schedule before taking away more parking spaces here or there. We have not seen plans, but we have been discussing this, and there are two paths that we can take. One is try to build a garage that has space for more cars. The other is try to build a garage that could be multi-purpose if the advent of autonomous vehicles comes along and we find less need for garage. We may want to be able to use that Hillman space for offices or condominiums, other things like that. So it is on the radar. We don't have a firm plan, but it is definitely being talked about.
I know it's on the radar. I mean, we've been hearing about it since prior to 2012 that it's falling down. I just find it kind of interesting that we are not any closer to seeing, at least I have not seen it, a plan. And I think that's a critical part of buy-in to anything that's moving forward in downtown Annapolis. How can we be this close? I mean, I'm going to put him under the bus. Brian Callahan, I can't know if I said that right, came in and was talking with me, and he said that we're probably not going to do Main Street before we do the garage. Well, Main Street has a plan currently and could have been done and would almost be complete at this point. How are we going to do our garage first if we don't have a plan? If we're still just in the discussion and then we haven't even opened it up to public comment. I'm just hoping that this is something that you all take as a priority and that you will keep us, all of us. I live in Ward 5, so as a resident, I'm concerned about it. As a business owner, I'm concerned about it. And I just hope that we think about this infrastructure before we start taking infrastructure away. Okay, any other questions?
Alderman Peon.
Thank you. Mr. Chance, how long have you worked down on Main Street in the family business?
I'm 20 years in a row. And
Okay.
I also did temporary work when I was a kid throughout, but 20 years, we'll say.
Have you had the opportunity to observe the approximate or characterize the general speed of automobiles on Main Street?
Most of the time, it's pretty slow. Then you also have times when people speed up Main Street.
Okay. Have you noticed bikers on Main Street before?
Yeah.
How would you describe their speed? Characterize their speed.
Most of the time, it goes with the flow of traffic. Of course, traffic's going up Main Street, not down Main Street. They're doing that. We do see bikes going down Main Street, mainly Jimmy John's, but occasionally something else.
Yeah, that's all, Main Street's all brick where you are, correct?
Yes.
As a matter of fact.
It's all brick all the way up.
Yeah, all the way up.
For the most part.
How are travel conditions when it rains on Main Street?
Travel conditions get slippery. Worse is parking conditions, especially on my side of the street. If it's a heavy rain, it becomes a river. People can't get out of their cars on that side of the street. It's something that was supposed to be taken care of with the re-bricking of Main Street, but still is there.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you on Thursday. Next, Elvia Thompson.
Good evening. I'm Elvia Thompson. I live at 704 South Cherry Grove, and I'm here as president and co-founder of Annapolis Green and as watershed steward. Mr. Mayor, Alderman Savage, and Alderwoman Tierney, I want to thank you for coming to the electric vehicle showcase a couple of weeks ago in the pouring rain. I really appreciate your support with that. We had 30 cars, even in the pouring rain. And I understand that the city is going to move ahead, and I hope soon, on electrifying at least some of its fleet, and we'll support you in any way we can with that. But I'm here really to speak in support of Resolution 4618, the resolution that would apply the city's discretion to a requirement of 100% stormwater treatment on properties proposed for redevelopment. And this is not to ask the council to change the code. This is simply for the mayor and the city manager to direct the appropriate city officials to apply the maximum requirement already in the code. It's important to the health of our creeks, since every one of our creeks within city boundaries is considered an impaired waterway. And I don't need to tell this council how important it is to keep stormwater where it falls, to allow it to infiltrate as nature intended. And regardless of where a redevelopment project is located, the stormwater that falls on an impervious surface will flow downstream and pollute a creek. Requiring 100% treatment is a step we can easily take to keep our waterways cleaner. And developers must help the city meet its TMDL requirements. As our climate changes and stronger and more frequent storms become the new normal, it already is, taxpayers can't foot the entire bill for the consequences of development. So I urge you to apply the 100% requirement to all redevelopment projects that have not as yet received final approval. This is not changing the rules on the developers. This is simply applying the code as it currently exists with the discretion that you already have. And approval of this resolution and direction of the staff to carry it out is the responsible thing to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elvia. Next speaker is Kevin Sullivan.
My name is Kevin Sullivan. I live at 7 Cumberland Court, Annapolis, Maryland. I got a question for you, Ms. Finlayson. They get back to you? Everybody's talking about the procedure of this government. You don't have any. That's it. The assistant attorney on the Maryland Freedom of Information Act contradicted this document. Let me give it to you so you can take a look at it. Take a look at the pictures. You think that's the code? Come on. You know, here, Chairman Schmickel, this is March 13th, 2007 when I started talking to these people. the people that want to conserve or keep the city the way it is. We don't review air conditioning. That's a lie. Remember St. Mary's? Remember when they had an issue with air conditioners? Who took it over? The HPC. In fact, the chairwoman at the time recused herself from being on that board because she was on the board of St. Mary's. I just got to tell you that this is a Freedom of Information Act, stamped. Maryland Freedom of Information Act. Your administration didn't fulfill it. Again, I've been here 5 times on this issue. 17 administrative and after-the-fact approvals by the HPC while I'm being sued for $4 million. Think that's cool, everybody? Is that the way you want our government to be run? Tell me. We got 3 attorneys on this commission right here, on this council. What would you think if I took you to court and you don't have any signed documentation? You're telling me that it's a verbal. Here in the United States of America, that doesn't work. Verbals, not from our government. See, we don't trust you. We want to trust you. We vote for you, at least 23% of us do. You got to help me out here. You know, the last thing I said to you, Mayor, when we left here is, I trust you. You're testing that trust. Yeah. What?
I want you to trust me.
Say again?
Said, I want you to trust me.
Well, then, here's what you got to do. You got to get gutters on that garage behind my house that they said there was no gutters. I mean, everybody's talking about pollution. In fact, you even had a fee at one time. You got to tear down those steps at your expense and rebuild them to the original footprint. I have documentation here saying that that's what you guys will do. This is not in code. We've had other members, just not me, of the Ward 1 citizens stand up with me. You've ignored all of us collectively. I know you don't mean to, but you do over and over and over again. We don't give up on democracy here. What are you going to do about it? Tell me today. Tell me.
Alderman Finlayson?
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes, ma'am.
we have in this room a city manager, our director of planning and zoning, our city attorney, all of whom either know or can help.
Good.
Okay, so I guess I should ask that our city manager would commit to looking into Mr. Sullivan's
Well, you know,
concerns.
that's the last time, every time I come here, you say
Well,
that.
but I can only do what I can do, and we have a city manager who directs all staff.
Mhm.
So I will ask her, if with the indulgence of the mayor, to ask her to look into this and get back to you at a date certain prior to the next council meeting. Is that a reasonable?
I haven't seen any of the documents, so
Of course not.
it's difficult for me
Okay,
to
well,
say
this
how
is
long
a
it would take to
start.
respond.
Okay,
Let
because
me
the
say-
document that you handed to us has John Arrison's name on it as the planning and zoning director. So it's,
I
you know,
have
it
many
started
more-
a while
I have many more documents from the
Okay.
government, many more documents contradicting all our laws, not giving a chance for a citizen to stand up for his rights.
Well, we have a.
As I said before, stiff-arming me and just saying no, just as this administration did, after telling me in 2 weeks we'll get back to you. So now, here's what Doug Smith, who I've worked with on this is what he told me. I'm catching up on some emails. Nobody ever returns an email. Israel never did. The last guy that was here, the wife of the HPC, or the husband of the HPC. Here's what Doug, an engineer, a non-government guy says, right? I think we residents will still have to continue to stand up for what is right. It's going to take a long time to fix everything, but we have to keep at it. This was done 5, 6, 10, 8 years ago. You know, no one lives in the house behind us. No Annapolitan. It's just a house. Nobody lives in them. They're Airbnbs or they're just a third house. I mean, I agree with you. And I like you, Ms. Finlayson. I've watched you over 12 years. You're an elected official. Third time in, you and Mr. Paone. You two asked for this from the administrations, from a couple of them.
Okay, well.
And they didn't get it to you.
Well, we're gonna ask again.
Good.
And Ms. Sutherland is sitting here, our city attorney is here, and our director of planning and zoning. So I will trust that they will, with the indulgence of the mayor, make a good faith effort to be back in touch with you at a reasonable.
First thing is, I understand you're trying to help.
I want to put a timeline on it
I
so
understand you're
that
trying
we're
to
not
help.
going down this road a year from now.
Here's what has to happen. You got to meet, she has to meet, and the mayor has to meet with me, Doug Smith, Carl Larkin, all of us, all of whom have spent a lot of time meeting with government officials in the Moyer administration, in the Cohen administration, in the Petalinas administration, and they've all said nothing, except when I sent that one letter, which was a Maryland Freedom of Information Act, and you lawyers will love this. He sends me back and says, this is a verbal. This is a verbal. He has no documentation. He has nothing. This is a verbal. I'm going to tell you it's a verbal. Well, verbals don't get it.
Thank
you very much.
And
Thank
I
you.
am responding to you.
I know you are.
Okay.
And I appreciate
So
it, ma'am.
I'm going to trust that there will be a good faith effort to look into this and try to come to some resolution. I can't say it's going to be the resolution you want, but I'm.
Well, will
gonna
it be
ask-
the resolution according to our laws?
Yes,
That's the only
that's-
thing that counts.
And you're absolutely right. And that's
I
what
mean,
we
so
want.
far, you haven't followed the laws. You didn't let, you had no public hearing on it, you had nothing. HPC refused, and I have documentation saying, refused to even take documentation. Refused to take it and refused to see me.
I can't begin to address what they will and will not
Yeah, well, that
speak to.
that commission needs to be reimagined as well. Very much so. Very, very much so. Yes, I know that my mayor has
okay.
issues with that
Okay.
organization. You know,
All right.
we all do. And really, with the council and the administration as well. Take care of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Alderman Paone wants to say something, and Alderman Tierney.
Mr. Sullivan, good evening, and to tell you the truth, I think, although I don't usually speak for my colleagues, but I think to some extent I will now. To be honest with you, I'm tired of seeing you having to come in here
I
like
am
this.
too.
And
I got a lot of stuff to do in my life.
well, you're not alone, I can assure you.
Yes,
Now,
that's
you've
true.
told us two things that you want. Let me make sure I understand that. Get the gutters on the garage behind the house, rebuild the steps to code at city expense. We can't reimburse you for the trouble and the expense you've been through, which are substantial. I know that. We all know that.
5 lawsuits?
Yeah.
Tell
I'm
me,
aware of
talk
that.
to me about it.
But while you're here, is there anything else specifically that you would like to tell us? I have no idea if we'll have any more success than we've had before, but at least you know,
I'll
we're gonna
stop
give it our
coming
best.
because because that's the end of it. Let me say, Fred, I appreciate it. I know what you're trying to get at, and I know you're trying to help me, you and Ms. Finlayson, and really all the members of the council, I believe that. And
What's
even the
frustrating for-
administration. You don't know what to do, though. See, that's the only issue.
Well-
Now, see, here's the thing. We hold you accountable. I mean, you know, today I get a message from my alderwoman who's saying, you know, we're so committed to this city and the democratic process and all that kind of stuff, but you're not. You don't do it. I'm not the only guy. I'm not the only guy that thinks this. So let me say this. Before you go talking about setting up the stairs and the gutters and all that stuff, sit down with the appropriate people, with me, Larkin, and Smith if they want to come, and let me show you the documentation of how rude the HBC leadership has been and the staff inside this building through planning and zoning and the law office. Three attorneys.
Look, there's no excuse for being rude, but frankly, we're not here to talk rude. We're here to hopefully get something done. And
good. I appreciate it. Thanks,
I
Fred.
can't excuse rude. I'm not
can't
rude
either.
to people in general, and
Good people do bad things, Fred. That's just the way it is in life. You know that, and so do I. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm saying they're rude.
trust me, doing what I did for a living for 37 years, I can assure you I know
I
that
know, and there's
quite
some
well.
guys on this council that knew about it 10, 15 years ago, and you know who you are, and I talked to you privately about it, and you said that it was wrong, and then you didn't do anything about it. So you can do whatever you want to do and talk whatever everybody wants to talk about, but the facts remain that this is not a one-off
No,
issue.
you hit the nail on the head. To be honest, I think most of us don't really know what to do. And that's why I'm asking you for specific things that you would like to see us done, and I agree with
I
you.
want you to live up to the code on everything that they did without any meetings with anybody. And basically, everything they did, they had to do over again, and what they couldn't do over again, they just said, oh, well, it's an oh, well idea. I mean, a lot of you people, I see you in the store, you can't even look me in the face. You can't. You can't stare me in the face because you're embarrassed. I don't like that. I want to like you. I do like you. I trust you. You need to do better. You need to be quicker.
Well, Mr. Gutwald, Ms. Sutherland, you know, we're here tonight.
Thank you.
Let's all
Thanks,
get.
Mr. Sullivan.
all sit
Thank you very
down,
much.
okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ellie, did you want to ask me a question?
Well, I just wanted to echo my colleague in that I've seen you up here twice, and you're still not clear on how we can rectify something where there has been a statute of limitations, but you answered it as best you could, so I can't add anything more.
There's no statute of limitations. They never had a CA. They're lying about the CA. It never even happened. I'll show you the documentation right here. You want to see it? Let me show it to you so that you understand that it was not from two sources, that it was not even approved. I know. And that 171 number, that was another made-up number inside planning and zoning. It's sad we got to go, you and I have to go through this. It's sad because of our employees' lack of knowledge or their malfeasance, one or the other. I'd like that documentation back as well, please. I can give you all copies you all want, whatever you want. Believe me, you've got them all before. Because every time I came here, I used to give you, but I know you never read them.
Mr. Mayor? Can you please
City
provide
Manager?
me with copies?
I'll get you anything you want, ma'am. I'll sit
Thank you.
down with you anytime you want to.
If you could get me copies and your contact information, please.
Well, there's so much, ma'am. I'm just going to tell you that thing's that big. You can't fold through it. It's you know, it's worse than our finance.
Okay.
The HPC is worse than our finance department. And don't look down, ma'am. Look me in the eye. You know it's bad.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Mayor.
So where do we stand? You want me to talk? Is she my point of contact now, or is Ellie? I'm gonna be with you two tomorrow morning anyhow, at that coffee shop. I did that with Israel 5 times anyhow. You know, we'll see if you do any better, but I'll get you all the documentation you want, ma'am.
Thank you.
I have a briefcase full of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present who would like to speak? Please come forward. State your name and address, please.
Good evening. I'm Jim Burdick. I live at 1719 Cedar Park Road here in Annapolis. I'm here to talk about City Council Resolution 4718. I, along with Kurt Riegel, we are the city delegates to the Anne Arundel County Severn River Commission. The commission is designed to provide environmental input or advice to the mayor, to the county council, to the city council, and to the county executive. Anything that has to do environmentally with the Severn River watershed. I'm speaking on behalf of the Severn River Commission this evening. I've been a city resident for 35 years. I live in Admiral Heights. And I'm here to express the Severn River Commission's full support of the no discharge zone. You know, many folks in the Severn River Commission, many folks on the council, many folks in this room tonight, many folks throughout the city have spent countless hours getting us to this point. David Barker has led the Black Butte Conservancy, and they've completed a very admirable piece of work, which is now known as the no discharge zone. The application will go to state DNR and then to the feds, the EPA, for approval. The Conservancy, they've learned a lot about the operational process, about the application process, and they fully understand the need for support from the jurisdiction that the NDZ falls in. EPA looks closely at that. So the jurisdictional support is really important. EPA looks at that, and now that Anne Arundel County has passed their no discharge zone resolution, it's important that the city do it as well. So on behalf of the NRC, you know, we thank you in advance for your consideration, and we hope and pray that we'll have a unanimous decision and a positive regarding no discharge zone resolution 4718.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, please. State your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Kate Bohannon. I'm a resident of Ward 7, and I'm here on behalf of the Annapolis Environmental Commission to testify in support of Resolution 4618 regarding stormwater. We are in full support of this resolution, which would allow the city government to apply stormwater laws as written and not create a new law. We're not in a position to delay implementation of this resolution. We have so many projects in the pipeline right now that would help us meet our watershed implementation plan. I want to reiterate that this law would not negatively impact affordable housing. I think that's been brought up before, and while we're the Environmental Commission and housing is not our primary focus, I just want to reiterate that requiring developers to treat 100% of stormwater is just what's the right thing to do, and it's not going to cause them to leave or not develop in the city. This is a very desirable place to live, and if they're not interested in developing here, I'm sure there are others that would come in. So I urge you to please support this resolution. It's the right time to do it. We can see that there's rainfall is increasing, and with the number of projects we have coming up, this is the right time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Anastasia Hopkinson. I live at 1036 Harbor Drive, Annapolis, and I'm representing the Annapolis Neck Peninsula Federation. We support Resolution 4618. I agree with what April and Elvia said earlier on all those points, and yet I want to add another point. Some may say you're adding a burden to developers on this. Well, when it comes to storm water runoff, it's either the developer pays now during development or the city pays later in cleanup. And I can give you an example of that briefly. There's 20 acres of land that were just cleared on the edge of the city, And when spring rains came, the runoff was substantial and came into the city and into Back Creek. The developer didn't intend that. They thought they had met all the legal requirements, in this case of the county, but that wasn't good enough. Stop order came through, they upped the game, no more rain, another stop order, they had upped the game even more, and we've gone through that cycle several times. They're patching it as best they can, they're doing the best they can to keep the storm water out of the creek and out of the river, but they would have liked to have done a better job. It's just that it wasn't required of them. And typically they'll say, well, we do the minimum requirement, isn't that good enough? Mother Nature didn't think so. So I want you to think about these TMDLs as tax money due later. So either the developer does it now or you pay later. That's for Resolution 4618. And I also want to kind of ask a question about Resolution 4518. This is regarding the Forest Drive Esport sector study, and it's a resolution entering it in for consideration by the council. It's the process, as I read the Maryland state regulation, is that the council not take any action on this study until it's a final draft presented to you, or a final document presented to you by the Planning Commission. Planning Commission's hearing is scheduled for November 1. So it's confusing as to why you would get ahead of the Planning Commission on this. It seems to be disrupting the process. Can anyone explain what's happening here?
Alderman Payon?
I agree with you. I mean, I don't know why we would have it before the Planning Commission looks at it and makes a recommendation.
Alderman Annette?
Yeah, so we have
It's only on first reader, by the way. So.
It's first reader, yeah, but entering it into first reader is technically a legal action, and the state law says the council may take no action. That's technical. However, I mean, in reality, give the Planning Commission time to review it, and it isn't a complete document. You know, in order to be complete, you have to have the comments of the county and the state regarding funding for the proposed infrastructure improvements, and those comments are not available yet. So even the Planning Commission, when they get it on November 1st, it has to be complete before they give it to you for your review.
Alderman Annette?
So the reason for the resolution is to start the process so that it can go to the Planning Commission for review. I don't know whether they're going to review a draft or a final product. What we have now is the draft. We'll await what their comments are, and then it'll go through the City Council process of review through the committee process. There will be questions, and the council then will decide whether they want to accept, modify, or reject the recommendations.
Or remand for changes, which is a possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it appropriate if we ask Director Gutwald to just explain the process? Thank you. Glad you asked. I'm getting.
First of all, we've already researched it. We went with, we asked the Maryland Department of Planning, and we also researched with the law office. And first reader is not considered an action taken by the city. This is our process. The Planning Commission has been with us the whole way, stepped forward through this whole process of reviewing the document. We have gotten comments in from the state and the county. They have also been part of this whole process in putting this document together. So we're not violating any law. It will go to the Planning Commission after first reader, as it normally does with any process. They will review it. They will make their recommendations and or approval, and it'll go through the rest of the City Council process. So we've already vetted this through the Maryland Department of Planning for the state, as well our own law office and the state's law offices. So we are in concert with state law and land use code.
I would like the Office of Law's opinion on that, because the state law is rather clear, to quote, land use, section 3203A3, legislative body may not hold a public hearing or take action until it receives the final report of the Planning Commission. So you're putting the cart before the horse here. You're doing it backwards by what Mr. Gutwald just described. And it's disruptive of the process. And it's rather disrespectful to the Planning Commission. They need to think it through. They may have changes. Who knows what they're going to do? Also, you need a complete document. You don't have those letters from county and state. And those are very important. Those are financing commitments, or, well, indications of financing commitments. Without them, it's an incomplete document.
We have all the comments. We've already reviewed it with them. If I don't have it in writing, I'll make sure I get it in writing. But we've already coordinated extensively with the county and state agencies. And I can tell you from the law office's perspective, what the comment, that first reader is not an action. It's definitely not a hearing by the city council. I don't want to speak for Mr. Melnick, but I have already vetted that because it's been a comment that was brought to us. So we're well aware of the situation, and I think I've got it in writing from the Maryland Department of Planning as well, that I am in concert with the state law and land use code. And I can't see how the Planning Commission could ever think that they're being disrespected, because we have had work session after work session, as you were well aware of, working with them the whole step and step the whole way through this whole process. We had multiple meetings. They know exactly what's inside and out on that in this document. So I don't think they'll feel disrespected.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Gutwald and Ms. Hopkinson. I did want to try to give you some assurances, Ms. Hopkinson, that as I found out recently with some other legislation, when it goes to the Planning Commission, the council can't take any action. It can't even go to the committees until we hear back from the Planning Commissions and we receive their written findings. So we can't even take we can't do anything until that happens. And there will also be an opportunity for public hearing, I believe. If there's not, I'll officially request one as a part of this. But yeah, and I'm also I meant to request that this be put on the agenda for the Environmental Matters Committee. That it be referred to the Environmental Matters Committee when the time's appropriate.
Yeah, I can appreciate the committees want to get their arms around the study. It's difficult to understand, and the more time you get to do that, the better. But we're just a little surprised that you're stepping out of what appears to be the process set forward by the state. And the Planning Commission has the right to make changes. I don't think you'll be proposing changes to them until they present you the final document, at which point you review it and you can choose. It's just untoward. It's unusual. We need time. This is a really big document, and it's very confusing the way it's written. It's dense. It's kind of like hard to understand how they draw conclusions from the evidence they give. So it does take time to figure it out, and the more time we give the Planning Commission and the citizens who are working their way through it, the better. If your committees can help with that process, well, all the better. That would be wonderful. But I think it's unusual. So. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak tonight? Please come forward.
Cynthia McBride. I have a business on Main Street, McBride Gallery at 215. Most laws are devised and passed when the public realizes there's a problem in society that can only be solved or stopped by a law. Some say we have too many laws already, but then along comes a creative person who finds a way around the law to do his or her will. This test or experimental sidewalk extension and bike path was planned and built with no public hearings as required by state law. I brought along a copy of the state law. It's the Maryland Land Use Code 6-102, Title 6, which is about street planning and construction, and 6-103. These sections require a public hearing with 10 days notice and many other requirements. However, by calling it a test or an experiment, many laws were bent and some broken on this major construction project on our historic Main Street. This once somewhat sleepy business community has awakened to an alarming new reality of a changed street, harming our businesses and drastically changing the appearance of this historic vista. So to the aldermen, it seems we might need one more new law to prohibit city officials from spending city money, using city employees, and calling it a test or an experimental construction project. I served in the 1980s and 1990s on 2 10-year comprehensive plans for the city, working with the Chamber of Commerce and the residential groups. And from this came improvements, long-range, well-thought-out plans to revive Inner West Street and Outer West Street. Yes, and with public hearings to get broad input and advice. Let's get back to a thoughtful and legal process involving all stakeholders. It works.
Any more speakers?
Mr. Mayor, council members, as
State your name and
oh,
address,
I'm
please,
sorry,
sir.
Bob Schwartzberg. My wife Judy and I own Big Cheese downtown in Annapolis. We have for the last 25 years.
Address.
I'm starting to realize, as a senior citizen, I'm now the torch bearer of the Tony Evans era to try and protect Annapolis, to help keep Annapolis the way we've had it, the way it's been, but also to realize, as I said before, Mayor, change is inevitable, but change being controlled. You know, Judy and I were there Saturday night on Main Street, protesting with other businesses, proudly holding the sign, "Not on Main Street, save our businesses." And yes, I saw you come down Main Street. I believe you were the second bike. And even though you're over 16, you didn't have a helmet on. And I did see a couple of ladies have a little difficulty navigating those rubber bumpers that you have. But if you got a bike path downtown, on a day like today, how many riders do you see? How many would you see? And as was testified, when those bricks get wet, somebody's going to slip and get hurt. We're not against bike paths. We're not against bicycles. We've all ridden them. But Saturday downtown Annapolis, if you were there, not after your bike-a-thon in the morning, but the traffic was horrendous. It's the worst I've ever seen. You had 4 crossing guards, who, by the way, happened to come in for lunch, and indicated it was a real mess. You normally have a couple of crossing guards on weekends. You had 4 this past weekend. That's 2 extra people that you're going to have to pay. Plus you had some policemen down there. That's extra people you have to pay. Cars coming down Green Street, trying to turn to go up Main Street, it was backlogged. Randall Street was backlogged. It's a real mess. I think you need to rethink this, sit down again, talk with people, see if you can't come up to a solution that satisfies everybody, but you don't need a bike path on Main Street, going up or going down, and you do have bicycles going up Main Street in the bike path. There have been people that have mentioned that. And kids the other day coming up Main Street the wrong way, when they got to that little roustabout or whatever you want to call it, they just went over the sidewalk. They didn't stay in the path. It's not working. Do it the right way. Excuse me. You know, I'm getting a little emotional with this. I've seen a lot here in all the years. Annapolis has a lot to offer. I had two people in this morning, a lady from Williamsburg with her daughter. We talked about the Rockefeller Foundation wanting to do to Annapolis what it did to Williamsburg. And the mother said, I'm so happy that he did it to Williamsburg and not Annapolis. We're here in Annapolis because we love it, because of the historical value that it has, because of the quaintness that it has. It's not Europe. It's Annapolis. It's Annapolis. Alderman Savage, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe your invocation could be summed up in one word: unity. Would you say that? And I'm really, and I think emotional again, in all of the meetings I have attended. I've never seen a city as divisive as it is now, and one person causing this, and one person can undo it. And I've never attended a city council meeting where I've had to sit and look at uniformed policemen and the city councilmen. I don't know the reasoning for that. I should feel like I can come in here and I'm not being intimidated by armed policemen. This is a safe place, and we shouldn't have this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Schwartzberg. Alderman Finlayson.
I'd like to speak about our police officers that are here. They're not here to protect us from you or vice versa. But a number of years ago, when there was an incident in a Board of Ed meeting and I believe a council meeting, our then police chief, and we're talking many years ago, thought it was best that we would always have someone here. Our officers are interested, so usually they're out of sight. They're here if they're needed, but they're not usually in here, but they are very committed to everything that goes on.
Okay.
So don't think they're just here for this. They've been here for a long time.
I remember Mayor Callahan with his bulletproof vest, so.
Well, thank you.
Alderman Pintel? Oh, you good? Okay. Thank you,
Mr.
guys.
Schwartzberg. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Please come forward.
Peggy Summers, 110 Prince George Street, Annapolis. Mine is a question concerning the Public Works building on Spa. What is happening? I had heard it might be a garage, and then I heard it might be condominiums. And then a question has come up: is there an environmental hazard on that property with a leaking tank? Anybody answer?
So we're still holding up to see if we're going to be rebuilding Public Works there or not. It's a discussion that's being had between the council Environmentally, the site has been cleaned up, I'm assuming, because Public Works was approved to be on that site. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm new to all this. I'm here on a totally unrelated, my company's lease. My name is Peter Vonderheide. My wife and I own Kayak Annapolis. For the last 11 seasons, we've been running a guided historic tour of Annapolis by kayak from Truxton Park into downtown. And just sitting back here, I just heard about the no discharge zone. I'm amazed that that's even being discussed. For the last 11 years, every time I saw discharge, I was like, ooh, somebody got away with it. I can only imagine what the fine would be if they got caught. So just as somebody who makes his living in and on Spa Creek for the last 11 seasons, yeah, that should absolutely happen without question. That's all I have on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come forward and speak? Seeing no movement in the chamber, I declare the public hearing closed. Thank you, everyone. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is an update from the mayor.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I would like to thank all of the business owners who were able to join us tonight to celebrate their milestone anniversaries. These independent businesses are what keeps our economic heart beating in this town. They offer not only outstanding customer service, but truly unique selections and items that cannot be found online or in an Amazon consumer world. Before we begin the rest of our agenda for the evening, I would like to thank the team of people who organized our amazing gospel event, Praise in the City, yesterday at Maryland Hall. I'd also like to thank Margaret for opening her doors at Maryland Hall when the weather forced the plan to be an inside event. This event capped off a great week of events in the city. I was honored to walk in the Walk at the Out of Darkness event on Saturday at the Navy Stadium that helps bring more awareness to the issues of suicide. The event and its hundreds of volunteers did an excellent job. On Thursday, Alderman Savage and I joined Georgetown East Elementary School students and their principal, Andre Dillard, to celebrate the removal of the fence on Victor Parkway that divided the communities of Fairwinds and Victor Haven for far too long. The fence coming down also helped open the path that bicyclists have wanted better access to for many years as well. Victor Parkway is a critical connector for cyclists coming from downtown Annapolis to Esport and then accessing the bike lanes of Edgewood Road to Bay Ridge Road that takes them to sweeping views of the bay in Bay Ridge community. It's one of the most desired rides by bicyclists, and I would like to thank Alderman Savage for his commitment to getting this fence taken down. I would also like to thank David Gerald and his crew for their work on the project. I would also like to thank David Gerald and the Department of Public Works crews for their efforts to install the bike lane that opened last week. No matter how you feel about a temporary bike lane, these crews did a great job laying out and installing the project to help us imagine what it could be like if we build additional pedestrian and bike infrastructure into the rebricking of Main Street. On Friday and Saturday, we had hundreds of people and bikers and families and others enjoy a lighted bike parade and Annapolis Bike Day. And I would like to thank John Corin, Alex Klein from Bike AAA for their partnerships in this endeavour. I would also like to thank Rachel Verne and Pedal Power Kids for putting on a great bike rodeo and kids event, even helping a few young ones learn to ride. I would also like to recognise the business community who also had their voices heard on Friday night. I hear your concerns. We will get together soon on Thursday and talk about the results of this bike path, and I'm hearing you loud and clear. On a final note, I would like to wish the Annapolis Boat Show great success in their upcoming event. The boat show shows are one of our greatest economic engines, and their success means our city's success as well. I look forward to welcoming people from around the world to our waterfront, our shops, restaurants, and our hotels. Thank you all. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is appointments, beginning with AP-27-18, the appointment of Andre Atkins to the Board of the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis.
Mr. Atkins, please come forward to the table.
Mr. Mayor, as a point of process, do we need to take a vote on it for the entire council to?
All those in favour?
Aye. Thank you.
Okay, Andre. Hand up and repeat after me.
I, Andre Atkins,
Do swear or affirm, as the case may be,
do swear or affirm, as the case may be,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance
that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance
to the state of Maryland,
to the state of Maryland,
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution
and
and laws thereof,
and that I will,
that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of Member of the Housing Authority Board,
execute the office of Member of the Housing Authority Board,
according to the Constitution and laws
according to the Constitution and laws
of this state, and the Charter and Code of the City of Annapolis.
And the Charter and Code of the City of Annapolis. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for saving me there, Shanika. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar include, as first readers, O-41-18, emergency procurement, R-45-18, 2018 Forest Drive / Esport sector study, R-47-18, no discharge zone. On second reader, O-21-18, parking fund appropriations, and R-43-18, Maryland Energy Administration grant policies. As I understand it, R-46-18 was moved to be off of the consent calendar. So I believe that concludes the consent calendar items.
Move the consent calendar.
Alderman Finlayson?
Sponsor and then
No discharge?
Same here.
Okay.
And, Mr. Mayor, has the no discharge zone been referred to the Maritime Advisory Board?
I think it's been through the whole process, right, Rob? Yeah.
I got a call from the director of that board asking that it's not referred to anybody, really. It's a
Alderman
resolution.
Savage?
It's my understanding that they have been sent versions of it, drafts to comment on, but they've not gotten back to the requesting back to Conservancy with comments.
Okay, so approval of the consent calendar. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
You move to approve it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Second. Okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles?
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez?
Aye.
Alderwoman Henson?
Aye.
Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Okay. Ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is the public hearings, beginning with Ordinance O-29-18, lease of Truxton Park to Kayak Annapolis LLC. Lease of Truxton Park to Kayak Annapolis LLC for the purpose of approving the lease of certain city-owned property at Truxton Park to authorize the operation of a kayak water touring business and matters generally relating to that lease.
Is there anyone here who'd like to speak on that? Please come forward. Okay, no one coming forward. I declare the public hearing on O-29-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Ordinance O-33-18, commercial recycling, for the purpose of establishing guidelines for commercial recycling and clarifying the enforcement procedures for repeat violations of Chapter 10.16.
Anybody like to speak on this? Okay. I declare the public hearing on O-33-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Ordinance O-35-18, pruning of trees, for the purpose of increasing the discretionary height clearance for tree pruning in streets subject to truck traffic.
Anybody here like to speak on this? Okay. I declare the public hearing on O-35-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Ordinance O-36-18, public peace, noise prohibition, for the purpose of making technical corrections to the City of Annapolis environmental and motor vehicle noise standards.
Anybody here like to speak on this? Okay, I declare the public hearing on O-36-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Ordinance O-37-18, Ethics Code, Financial Disclosure Updates, for the purpose of amending the City of Annapolis Ethics Code definition of, quote, official, including Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis, also known as HACA, officials in the financial disclosure reporting requirements applicable to city employees and appointed officials, removing obsolete language concerning the financial disclosure reporting of HACA officials, and amending the information required for the examination of a financial disclosure statement.
Anybody here like to speak on this? Okay, I declare the public hearing on O-37-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Ordinance O-40-18, vacant non-residential buildings registration, for the purpose of requiring vacant or partially vacant non-residential buildings to be registered with the Department of Planning and Zoning, requiring posting of vacant property signage on all such buildings, establishing a registry of vacant or partially vacant non-residential buildings, and matters generally relating to registering vacant non-residential buildings.
Anybody here like to come forward and speak on this?
Good evening, Eric Evans, 38 Citygate Lane. I just want to talk about the vacant residential buildings, non-residential buildings having a sign being posted on it. I really believe this can attract the wrong element to a property. Also, when you require to put a vacant sign on a building that's not vacant, i.e. this law says that if the commercial area is vacant, but the residential above is filled, that you can put a vacant sign on it. When you mark a building as vacant, you open it up for vagrants, vandalism, arson, and other issues that we don't want to bring attention to. It also notifies the public that an area is in decline, and making an area notifying the public that area is in decline hurts property values, hurts taxes. So I just believe, as written, it's not best suited for our city. Thank you.
Anybody else like to? Anybody else like to speak on this? Okay, I declare the public hearing O-40-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is legislative actions on second reader, beginning with Resolution R-39-18, City Co-Sponsored Benefit Concert Special Event.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt R-39-18 on second reader? Is this where you're... Isn't this Ross?
I second. Was there discussion?
There's a Finance Committee proposed amendment, right? No? So we're in discussion now, yeah. Alderman,
So, Mr. Mayor,
Arnett?
the council took this up at the last, its last meeting, and it was my sense the council was on the verge of voting this down. At the last minute, Alderwoman Finlayson suggested that maybe it could come to the Finance Committee to see if there was some compromise or an alternative position. So we took it up at the Finance Committee, and it was the sense of the Finance Committee that we wanted to find a way for the city to contribute, show its support for the capital, the victims, for the first responders, and for free press. And so we came up with a recommendation to, on the second page of the resolution, on page 9, lines 9 through 17, to strike those and add, and I'm not sure I'm getting this exactly correct, in lieu of waiving the fees, to contribute $10,000 donation to the Anne Arundel County Community Foundation Capital Gazette. And so that is a proposal that the Finance Committee recommends to the council for its consideration. So it would be passing the resolution, but instead of making it city-sponsored and waiving the fees, and it already is a city-sponsored, that we would make a specific contribution from the city to the fund. So I would move that we make that amendment to the resolution.
Some discussion on that. Alderman Henson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh.
May I discuss?
Yep.
So the Finance Committee's recommendation, would that require a budget appropriation for us to do that?
It would come from discretionary funds that are under the control of the city manager, who can allocate funds up to $25,000 without specific action on the part of the council.
Is there a history of the council doing that? There's been other violent crimes in the city, and people have been the unfortunate victims, and I just want to understand if we've done that in the past before, made any sort of contributions.
Not to my knowledge, there's not been a history of doing that. I think all along we felt this was a horrible, hopefully never again, event, and extraordinary things were going on. At the last council meeting, I expressed my frustration because, as you know, we've talked in Finance Committee and before the council about the incredible amount of fees that we waive, and I don't think that, I think we'll revisit that, and I don't think there's a desire to waive $350,000 plus of fees. But we also didn't want to have the city not be in support of the cause. So this was a creation, actually I'll give credit to Alderwoman Finlayson for conceiving this. And we offer to you as something that we think you can vote on, and you would not be waiving the $33,000 worth of fees, but we would still be making the gesture.
I go on record with some reservations. We had a year where we had a record number of homicides, and it was not this constitution of the council that was seated at that time, but the city didn't, from my understanding, make any donations to victims' families when those tragedies happened. So I don't know if we're setting a precedent here, or if it can be charged as unfair if we do so now and not at other times.
Payan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, let's hope we're not setting a precedent for so many reasons, because I pray to the Lord that we never, ever see anything like this in our town again. I pretty much expressed my thoughts back in July, I think, when this first came up, that I didn't like the idea of the city using taxpayer money to raise money for a nonprofit. At the time, there was some question as to whether there was a nonprofit involved. There were so many questions that I had, and I think we collectively had at that time, only some of which have been answered. Some important ones have been answered. As I understand it, the motion is to not waive the fee, but to donate $10,000. Despite what was said in some of the correspondence, I think I was the one that moved for a postponement at the last meeting. And the reason is that we would try to reach some type of a reasonable agreement, and it normally would go against my principles, but this was such a horrendous event, such a terrible tragedy, that I think it's a reasonable solution to the issue, and I was kind of on the other side at one point during this, as a matter of fact, for a long time with regard to this issue, but I'm going to support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand what you're saying, Alderwoman Henson, and I truly do not diminish any life that is lost. But I believe these lives, this drew national attention. Not that the others should or shouldn't. This was something that sent a signal regarding even freedom of the press and a constitutional issue.
You did.
Like I said, I understand what you're saying, but this was something that resonated and said something else about our country even. So that's my kind of take on it. But I'm not diminishing any life that's been lost in this city or anywhere else. But I definitely support what we're going to hopefully vote on tonight.
Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is, I guess, is for the Finance Committee. I'm sorry if I missed this. You may have already said this, but where are you proposing the money come from, the $10,000?
Out of the discretionary fund that is managed by the city manager, up to $25,000, after which it would require action on the part of the city council.
And how much money is in that fund?
I don't know at this point. I'd have to talk to the finance department. Should be mostly there.
Do you have that number?
It's either 410,000 or 490,000. It's what I refer to as the contingency account, and no monies have been transferred out of it to date. So if you vote to do this, we would collect the full $33,972, whatever it is, of fees, which we would recognize as revenue. And then we would turn around and appropriate $10,000, as opposed to simply waiving $23,972 of fees.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you,
Alderman
Mr.
Tierney?
Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification, is this a two-step process? The resolution reads that we waive the fees, and then where is the $10,000 introduced?
Amendment is to take out that we waive the fees, and instead we substitute
So
in lieu of waiving the fees,
okay,
we
so
contribute $10,000.
what's on the floor right now? Just the base
The
resolution?
proposed
The amendment?
amendment
Okay.
from the Finance Committee.
Okay. I think I've said it before. I think it's a great compromise because it was a discussion of process, just purely process on defining what a special event is, and this separates, you know, the law, the code, from our heartfelt, our heartfelt emotion on such a tragedy. So I fully support I call it a compromise, and I thank you, Alderwoman Finlayson, for suggesting it. And I
Henson?
understand my colleague's concern that it's just
Alderman Henson?
I don't want to, at the risk of mixing issues, I just want to underscore the optics here. Ward 6 does have the greatest concentration of public housing of all of the wards, so I feel I would be, in the words of my colleague, Alderwoman Pendell Charles, derelict in my duty if I didn't note for the record. We had residents in Newtown who were without power for 4 days, and we don't have a line item in our budget where we can allocate resources to them. We had the bike lane project, which had very passionate testimony, and it was $70,000 thereabout that was spent on it. A donation is to literally give money away. So in this instance, we are giving money away, but we don't have a way to account for some of our residents who need our help every day from the city. So the optics of it is that there are instances where we will give money away, and there are instances where we will not at all. So I just want to state that for the record.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you. Alderwoman, you're absolutely right. I think we do, as our city employees, do a lot for residents that we don't account for. You know, when the power was out in Newtown, it was our Public Works Department, it was our Police Department who was there all night with lights so that our citizens there would feel comfortable sleeping without power. Our Office of Emergency Preparedness. So while we don't give a lump sum to HACA, we provide resources so that our residents feel as safe as we can make them feel. A number of years ago, when we did have a homicide of a 15-year-old, there was a march that went through all of the wards and all of the public housing communities. And I am sure we did not give anyone a bill for all of the city services that were needed to make that parade, it wasn't a parade, but that march a successful one. So we do things in different ways, but there are resources going where we don't sometimes account the dollar value, but we see it in the overtime cost, or we see it in the over budget cost, but we are giving support where we need to.
If I just may respond, we did also give similar resources here. Our police officers did respond, and they received nationwide praise for their professionalism in the way that they handled this crisis. So we did support as well with our city services and then the event too. There was city property, there was city staff that was resourced for this. So we have, as a city, supported and I believe tried to wrap our arms around the victims of the Capitol shooting. And to our credit, we have a mayor who is sensitive to that and who understands that and was able to bring his skill and expertise to bear to kind of help the city heal. I'm just not sure that that's something that we then need to match with the donation when we as a city have already extended our resources and our own mayor's expertise there.
And correct me if I'm wrong, City Manager, I think the fees are inclusive of overtime for police and fire. So am I correct in?
Yes, ma'am.
So that $33,000 does include the cost of all of the services that they received that day.
Oh, I was referencing the police response on the day of the tragedy.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderwoman Henson, why don't you and I get together and talk about some legislation that can fill some of the gaps and holes that you've indicated tonight, and we'll see if we can't plug some of those that you've mentioned tonight. So why don't we try to come up with some things and co-sponsor? Would that be amenable?
Thank you. I have some ideas, and I would welcome the
I figured you did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alderman Payon.
Does the 33,000, Madam City Manager, include the staff time, the salaries of staff that worked on this full-time for
It only
3 weeks
includes,
at least?
It only includes overtime costs consistent with how the city has always calculated the fees for special events.
Okay. Have we, not sure we've ever had a special event that involved that much labor, been that labor intensive for city employees. I can't think of any, but
Well, wasn't that labor intensive, Fred?
Well, be that as it may, it doesn't change my stand.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any parameters on the discretionary budget? I mean, full disclosure, we use that to buy tables and chairs on Main Street. So what is
Those
the
are
parameters?
two different line items. The discretionary budget that Mr. Arnett is referring to is in non-allocated costs.
Okay.
Jody's pulling it up right now to get the exact pro forma line for you and the amount and the name of that line item. The tables and chairs were purchased out of funds appropriated in the mayor's office for the city manager that falls under the mayor's budget under a line item called special projects, which are funds used for a multitude of things over the years at the discretion of the city manager.
Okay. I thought I heard the term at the finance committee that was from a discretionary budget. I thought I heard that.
Mr. Arnett may have described it that way. I'm not certain, but it is a line item called special projects in the mayor's office under the city manager.
Anybody else? Okay, so we have a second on the amendment. So, all those in favour of motion R-39-18 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Huh? No? On the amendment? Okay.
Yes, that's right. I forgot.
On the amendment?
I move the amendment was seconded and now we vote.
Okay. All those in favour of the amendment, sorry?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
Ayes have it. Right. So, now I'll go back to that. The motion is amended R39 on second reader. All those in favour, say aye.
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 Okay. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney? Aye. Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles?
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez?
Aye.
Alderwoman Henson?
No.
Alderman Savage?
No.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Ayes have it. And Teresa, could you give us a breakdown of how much was raised on the event? And I want to thank all the council for their help. I know it was something unusual, but I think we raised a good amount of money for a horrible situation. If you could summarize that for us, please.
$63,615 of ticket sales was raised and donated directly to the Community Foundation.
That will be doubled, right? Yeah.
That will be doubled. I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting this, so I got to pull it up here.
Sorry.
$116,834 of revenue from sponsorships and cash sales of beer and alcohol was raised. That's the revenue. The expenses are $65,867. So the net income before paying the city fees is $50,967, and after paying the city fees, it is $16,995.
Thank you.
And that'll also
Plus
be,
the 10,000 we're going to donate.
That's not going to be a revenue or an expense of the concert, right? That's what you guys just voted on? Okay.
the 17 will also be matched.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. City Attorney. Please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is R-44-18, city-sponsored special event, Elks Annual Pre-Labor Day Parade.
Is there a motion to adopt R-44-18 on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion on the Elks
Oh, they're not here.
waiving the fees? Alderman Arnett?
So, Mr. Mayor, this was something that came in after the fact, but it's a parade that goes on annually. This also requires a waiver of a small amount of fees. At our work session, I think we concluded that we need to set up some kind of a committee, maybe made up of businesses and residents and some council members, to go back and re-examine our special events legislation and the different items that are groups and activities that are included in the special events. And so for me, voting for this and voting for the waiver of fees is appropriate. We're following along on past practices, but I am comforted by the fact that we are talking about taking another look. I certainly was astonished when we got the accounting from the city manager during the budget, the amount of fees that are waived, and I think we really do need to think about that very seriously. Some of that may be to reprioritize special events. I know you have some new special events in the form of festivals that we need to consider as all part of that. And so for myself, and I said this to my constituents, I think accepting this resolution and waiving the $1,700 is something that we should do, and then move on to re-examining the whole special events process.
Alderman Pindell Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things regarding this item before us. One is, we had talked about it the work session the other day, that we do have 3 summer holidays, Memorial Day, 4th of July, as well as Labor Day. We do have parades for each one of the first, and this could definitely be considered as one of them for the third one. The other thing is, what the information that we received from Mr. Conley indicated, that not only do they have a parade, but they also have an education and health component that's coupled with what they do. And I thought that was extremely important in determining the benefits, not only of the parade, but also the other things that they provide to the children in the community, which I think is, you could probably, and I'm sure you could put a dollar figure on, but we won't do that. But the benefits that we see regarding the children in the community, as well as the adults, with the health component as well as the educational component. Thank you.
Alderman Tierney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know I've been accused of sounding like a mother lately, but I was just wondering if there was some way that we could apologize to them. I thought that it was very awkward for them to all, be here in anticipation a couple of weeks ago, and no one is here tonight, and I just don't know who that point person would be, but I think we owe them an apology about the process and with the note that maybe that would be you, Fred. Okay. Rhonda, yeah. Thank you.
Alderman
Thank you.
Payon.
I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think if this comes down to the fact that they were hit with this bill at the last minute. This parade has gone on forever. We've never requested that they cover the city costs before. I think that they've gotten an accurate picture at this point. If they want to continue with the parade, they will have to, if not pay for everything for this, at least pay for part of it, a large part of it. I don't think it's unreasonable, given the relatively small amount involved here, for us to waive it retroactively. You know, in terms of an apology, the alderman involved here had every right to do what he did. I would note that they're not here tonight, which means they came out for one night and one night only. And if we voted the last time, they would have left the same as they did, except they would have had an approval under, well, what I think will be an approval under their belt. I'm not saying that I feel good about what happened by any means. I certainly apologized for them waiting around several times when we took a break. I don't know that, I mean, it's a nice thought, but I don't know that we as a council ought to be doing that, since somebody exercised their right to make the motion they did. And I'm sorry, and like I said, it's not like they're all back here again tonight. So they were here one night, they planned on being here one night. Hopefully the inconvenience was relatively minimal.
Alderwoman Pendle-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did apologize to them publicly when they were here the last time. So I saw some heads nodding, so I think they were fine. Thank you.
Well, they'll be finer if we pass this.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favour say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is R-46-18, application of the City of Annapolis stormwater regulations.
Is there a motion to adopt R-46-18 on second reader?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Alderman Savage?
Yeah, thank you. So just to provide a little bit of background and explanation, just about where this is coming from. So we have a stormwater management code here for the city, and that's based on the state model. And so that code says that when new development comes into our city, they're required first of all to either reduce their impervious surface, reduce their pavement by 100%, or they have to treat the equivalent amount of stormwater. The key number is just that 100%. So if you're looking at redevelopment projects where they're not clearing forests or anything like that, they only need to treat 50% of their impervious surface. So it's 100% for new development, 50% for redevelopment. And it's set up that way to try to give some incentives towards redevelopment and to lower some of the burden for redevelopment. So another key part of that law says that minimum number, that 100% and that 50%, can be increased if there's sufficient cause. And one of those sufficient causes is water quality issues downstream. So as you may be aware, all of our creeks are part of water bodies, in this case, South River, Seven River, that are those are impaired waterways per the EPA. And they're impaired because of the stormwater runoff and the pollution that comes from that runoff. And so what this resolution seeks to do is kind of bring clarity to the code, because right now that provision that I mentioned, increasing that minimum, going beyond that minimum, if there's water quality concerns, has never, to my knowledge, been utilized by the city. And I think that's a bit of a problem. I mean, that was included in the state code, which again we modeled for a reason, right? And I think we have sufficient reason with our water quality concerns for it to be utilized. And so again, what I'm trying to do is not create new law, but to provide clarity that we think this is sufficient cause to be requiring more than the minimum stormwater treatment. And just to give a little more background, again, as you may recall, the city's consultant, AECOM, who did the stormwater reports for us, they estimated that we have $20 million of program expenses to meet our federal TMDL water quality targets. That's a lot of money, and that the timeline for that is we have to meet that goal by 2025. So we can't afford that alone. You know, we have the stormwater fee, which is paid by residents. We have our watershed groups that are doing some of the work, and this proposal would really start to make it so the developers are contributing to that. So for example, if they treat anything beyond the state minimum, so anything above that 50 or 100%, we can claim those as credits towards our TMDL. That's less we have to treat, less water we have to treat as a part of that 20 million. So it's almost directly reduces that 20 million obligation. And so the importance is if we don't do that, then it's going to fall on the taxpayers' shoulders. So I'm trying to find ways that we can reduce that impact. And you know, we have had some developers who've said that they've told the Environmental Commission, you know, they'll treat more if they're asked by the city. And so again, this is what I'm trying to do, is have the council make it clear that we would like staff to ask them to treat more stormwater.
Alderman Payon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, before we go any farther on this, I would move for a postponement to a date certain so that these can be referred to various committees. It's my understanding that was not done. I certainly haven't gotten any reports from committees. I've got a lot of questions about this, although I know a lot more about it than I did this afternoon when I spoke with Alderman Savage at lunchtime. I've got some fairly basic questions. I mean, 150%. Does that mean they have to not only take care of 100% of the stormwater, but then half the stormwater next door or something? What does that mean? It's not really explained here. I understand he's going to offer a couple of amendments, and I question the constitutionality of this, but I feel a lot better about it once the amendments, if they get approved. There isn't really the reference I would like to other sections in Article 17 of the municipal code that I'd like to see here, because I've got some problems with the criteria that's being used, but they're largely explained in other parts of Article 17. It would have been nice to have reference to that made, you know, within this ordinance. I'm not being critical. It's just a little confusing, frankly, when I read it, and I think it's appropriate. Why shouldn't this go through the committee process? I'm not against it. I can tell you right now. I think it's you know, I'm all for clean storm water and to take measures to ensure that it remains clean, but I just don't really feel like I know as much as I would like to before I vote tonight.
I'll just ask Alderman Savage on the 150%, what does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, and let me just provide some clarification on why it didn't go to committee. It's just because it's simply a resolution, and nobody requested that it be sent. I'm sorry. It's because it was a resolution, and those by default don't go to committees unless requested. That's the only reason why it hasn't gone.
I wasn't trying to be critical.
I'm just letting you know. It was no deliberate intention not to have it go. That's just because this isn't a change in our laws, it's not
It's pretty
creating.
important, potentially a very important change.
Well, it's clarifying what's in the existing law. It's
No
not
pun intended.
it's not anything that isn't already required. So it's a little different. If it was, you know, I completely agree. If it was an entirely new law, then it would go through a rigorous process. And I do want to, in the future, make a lot of refinements to the overall law and go through that process. But there's more that I want to do than just deal with this percentages. But in terms of the 150%, just see if I can try to explain this. So it is kind of counterintuitive when you think how are they going to treat more than what falls on their property. But if you look at when they do their calculations, they're using, for example, typically a 1-inch rain event. So your typical annual storm, that's what they're using to base their calculations on. So that's all they have to treat. So if you say they have to treat 150% of the storm water, that just kind of bumps up the storm. So it says they have to treat a larger storm event. So maybe it'd be a 2-inch storm event instead of the 1-inch that they'd be treating.
Okay.
Because I'm sure as you're well aware, we're getting more frequent, heavier rains, and so this would essentially increase that capacity. As somebody mentioned, our laws just haven't been keeping pace with that. So besides this, I want to revisit our sediment control and some other things just to bring them up to speed. But that's just
Well, Mr. Mayor, I have some other questions, but I believe I did move for a continuance. If I didn't, I would now. If I didn't,
Okay, we have a second.
to get a lot of the questions I have answered. Otherwise, we might be here for quite a while.
Okay. All right, we have a second on that?
I'll second it, yes.
Just some discussion, Ellie?
Yeah, here's what I think. I am a co-sponsor, and no one can argue the merits of this, this resolution. But what concerns me is when I read the staff report, and for something of this to work, we have to have, complete, buy-in from the staff, because we give an enormous, well, not enormous, but we give a responsibility to the Director of Public Works. We give him a lot of discretion and a lot of subjectivity to look at each project on its own merit. And I'd like to hear more from Speaker Bush is on my mind, from Director David Jarrell. I'm not sure in what context we can have that discussion. And then I'd also like to know, from a practical standpoint, being, bear with me as I put my construction hat on and I'm looking at a project in a linear fashion, there's a point where the contractor, yes, developer, but say the contractor, they need to know what they're doing and arrange, I want to know what do they really need to do for 150%, say worst case. I mean, does that involve a filtering system? I need to hear that. I don't know what we're telling them to do. And as I said, I'm a co-sponsor. I know what the yacht club projects did and the city cost, and this is very important, but I want to make sure it works, and that we're not, blindly doing something that we believe in principle, but that's just not fair to. Yeah, I don't want to say. You know what I'm saying. I need to know what's involved in these ranges. What do we expect from asking them to do 150%? That doesn't mean anything to me. Is it riprap? Is it a as I said, a small treatment facility? Is it swales? And then how does it work? I mean, does David Jarrell say, okay, I want you to do this, and then they have to go to their site guy, and then their site guy comes up with a drawing, and we got to be practical about this for it to work. And then I don't know in what context we hear that discussion. I don't think it's committee. I think it's just, bringing, having David come to a meeting or something. Thanks.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I would suggest, Alderman Tierney, that the staff knows how it works. What we're trying to encourage is that the city, instead of just requiring the minimum, ask for more, and they will work with the developer, as they do now, to talk about whether this is storm, the swales and things like that, whether it's, what's the pool that we talk about, the stormwater pools, all of the different kinds of mitigation processes. I don't think you can be specific, because each one of those things will be different for each different project, and it's something the staff already works on with the developers as they're doing the approvals of it. So what the sense of this is, instead of just saying, okay, you've met the minimum, the staff working with the developer and saying, well, there's more that you can do here to retain more of the flow off of your property. Right now, 50% of it can and does go off the development property. And that's 50% that either gets dumped in the bay, and we continue to make it worse, or that we, through our TMDL requirement, have to pay, we being the taxpayers. And so what this is saying is negotiate with them to get more. I had a conversation with the city manager on this, and it is the city manager who would be telling the staff, you need to negotiate more than just the minimum. And whatever that might be, whatever that more would be, and it'll vary case by case.
Alderman Tierney?
Well, what I understand and trust, and I understand that something's broken now, obviously, and we need to address this. But what concerns me is when I read the staff report, this is our staff, and they're saying, you know, this is all nice, forgive me for paraphrasing, this is all nice and good, but we need something more definitive, and it would be better as an ordinance. So that gets my attention, and I want to know, well, then maybe we should look at it as an ordinance. You know, I don't want to approve something where the staff report is saying maybe this isn't the best way, and we put so much responsibility on the staff to implement it. So I just am very cautious.
Alderman Finlayson?
Yes, I think the devil is in the details, and I don't think we have the details. I was looking around hoping that Director Gutwalt was still in the room so he could help us to see what current practice is. We know what the minimum is, but we don't know that that's all they've held developers accountable to. So I would really like to hear from him as to what standard that is being used. I'm a little concerned about the implementation date after someone has already begun the process, and then as of the date of the passing of this legislation, all of that is for naught. So I don't think there's anything wrong with going back and sending it to committee for further development and analysis. So I would hope that that would be seriously considered. And I'm looking at the city manager who's waving, so.
City manager?
Thank you. First of all, this falls under Public Works, not under Planning and Zoning. So it's going to be Director Gerald, it's not going to be Director Gutwald. Having said that, from my conversations, extensive conversations about this resolution with Mr. Gerald, the current practice is, so right now state code says if it's a redevelopment, you have to treat a minimum of 50% for redevelopment and a minimum of 100% for new development, so that the Department of Public Works is not accused of being arbitrary or capricious, because you may require more under certain circumstances, including when a waterway is impaired. All of our waterways are impaired, right? So we could always require more than the 50% minimum. But the practice is to do the 50% minimum on redevelopment and 100% on new development, so that the department is never seen as arbitrarily saying you have to do 50%, but you have to do 100%, and you have to do 500%. The staff report does say that we believe this would be better done by ordinance. Should you pass this resolution tonight, and I believe there are some proposed amendments to it, but whether it gets amended or it doesn't, If the city council expresses its desire that it be 100% or more for redevelopment and 150% or more for new development, we will immediately change the minimum to 100% and 150% respectively. And I will not instruct the staff to go over 100% or 150%, even if your resolution says at least, because it puts them in the exact same position they're in now, where they can be accused of requiring more of one developer than another for an arbitrary or capricious reason.
Well, I guess I'm not sure then why we didn't go for an ordinance to begin with. Is it the retroactive date that we're seeking out immediately?
You'll have to have Mr. Savage address that.
Alderman Savage.
Address that now?
It was a question.
All right. So the reason is simply because, again, that is my intention, is to follow up with the ordinance, but that takes many months, speaking to all the different parties, and having the hearings and so on and so forth, committee meetings. But this resolution is just simply trying to provide, again, clarity on our existing law while we work on this larger change.
But you are changing the standard in the resolution.
No, the standard's not being changed.
To 150%?
The standard's not being changed. It's just being clarity on how the law should be applied.
Okay, well,
Existing
since
law.
we're still not clear, we have a motion on the floor to postpone.
Okay. Alderman Henson.
If I just may add to the dialogue, I think that our public comment process has to mean something, and we have had statements made on the record by developers that they would treat 100%, and then when it's later on and it's the site design plan, and then that's not there. So I think that if we give the Public Works Office the ability to have the express desire of the council also as wind in their sail when they're enforcing these standards, I think it helps them hold people to standards that have said, I would if you required me, or have said I would, and then the public will comment or the public will weigh in accepting that assurance, and then there's kind of been nothing there as the teeth in that to make sure that they follow through with that when they make promises beyond the minimum of the code. So I do think that this gives the flexibility there. I think what Ms. Sutherland is saying is that it's a flexible standard, that we're expressing this as the will, as the intent, and then they will look and review each project by project. But I think one of those factors that should be considered on the appropriateness of it for a project is if the developer has made statements and the public has relied on those statements that they will treat beyond what the minimum in the code is. I'm getting the head nods, is my understanding incorrect?
Yes, ma'am.
So what you're saying is that we will require every project to have the 100% for everything that is redevelopment, 150 for everything that is new development, and there will be no ability to evaluate a project for that specific project, but it's a blanket standard.
If this city council, majority of this council, votes to pass this resolution that expresses the city council's desire for the Department of Public Works to require at least 100% on redevelopment and at least 150% on new development, I will instruct the Director of Public Works tomorrow to require 100% and not more on redevelopment and 150% and not more on new development, because you have expressed your desire that the minimum be 100 and 150%, and to preclude the department from being put in the position of making an arbitrary or capricious decision, or simply being perceived as making an arbitrary or capricious decision. I will not have them go over the 100 and the 150%.
I think that type of rigidness is how we got into this situation where we defaulted to the minimum standards, and that's all we would enforce, even though the code didn't tie our hands to the minimum standards. So to say that this ordinance will result, or this resolution will result in a directive that we are just at 100 and just at 150 is regrettable, because I think it has room there in the code for it to be flexible and to be reviewed site by site. And so it's unfortunate that our standards are hard and fast, if it's the current way we're enforcing it with the minimums, or if it's the enforcement of it through the resolution. So for what it's worth, I think it's unfortunate that we don't have room to be flexible.
I would struggle as your city manager, and I know that the director of public works would struggle with how you would determine that one person did 100% and another person did 150% or 500% when all of our waterways are impaired.
I think one of those ways also is the public comments and their representations to the community at large. If a developer has said that they are going to do that, I think that that is one metrics for evaluating, is this an appropriate site to have the 100% and 150% if they've gone on record as saying that and the community has relied on them and has embraced the project believing that that's what will happen. So I don't know what that's worth, but it's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Alderman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with Alderman Henson on, I think my understanding of this resolution was that it would be an expression, the city council to strive beyond the minimum requirements and go as far as reasonably possible on a kind of project by project basis at this time, given that this is, really important, and I agree with Alderman Tierney that with the principle and we need to get there. I also think if it's going to be such a strong shift, we do need a process similar to the first iteration of APF for school capacity. In terms, there were working groups. There was, there was more, meat to the process because it deserves it. And so I would hope that, in support of this resolution, I think we can find a way to have some discretion from the administration, from the city manager's office and the department heads in terms of how we apply that.
Alderman Pindell-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I hear from Alderwoman Henson and Alderman Rodriguez is exactly what should go in the ordinance. This resolution, in my mind, covers this minimum standard where we stick to not being discretionary or arbitrary and capricious. And once we get to the ordinance, then we can actually set the standards that you're referring to. That's how I see it.
Alderman Net.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would ask the maker of the motion to be more clear. A motion to postpone, according to Robert's rules, is a motion to kill unless it's made to a specific time. And also more clear, you said go to committee. I assume you mean go to the Environmental Matters Committee. So could you clarify your motion? Postpone for until when? Is it postponed for 1 or 2 council meetings and to the Environmental Matters Committee to come back with clarification?
I think that would be appropriate. I would say this, as I understand it, the second meeting in October would be the first one after the Environmental Matters meeting. I mean, you can always move that up if you wanted to do it in 2 weeks. I mean, that's fine with me if you can get it done that quickly, but in the ordinary course, I think it'll be 2 meetings from now.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a kind of comment, Madam City Manager. I do hear you and staff in terms of wanting some of the ambiguity removed. But I'm still find myself a little torn, just to be honest, because if this is something if the discretion is something that's in our current code, and which means we're legally able to do it, how can we be sued for being arbitrary and capricious for following what's in the code? I mean, because I'm also told in the sure. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Alderwoman Pindell-Charles.
Yes, being a former member of the Rules Committee, I think that it also should be referred to rules as well.
Okay. You okay?
Yes, our officer had to leave, but
Okay.
there's no police supervisor here.
Okay. Right.
Just to finish my thought. So I've also been told, and, when I was a staff person reviewing projects, that you review based on a case-by-case basis. Every project is different, and one project does not set precedent for another project, which kind of tells me that you can be different. The city has been different on a project-by-project basis without being accused of being arbitrary and capricious. So I've been hearing multiple...
I would simply say, and I hate to bring up a really sensitive subject here, but I'm going to bring it up. We, on the sidewalk decking on Main Street, we complied with our purchasing regulations. And we awarded that contract to the lowest responsible bidder. Yet we have been accused of awarding that contract to someone that the mayor has done business with before. I do not want my director of public works to be accused of requiring less of someone who may have a perceived connection to the mayor or any one of you or me or the director of public works or anyone. So it is a very real issue that we may have to deal with if we require different mitigation from different developers. When all of our waterways are impaired. If we had some waterway that wasn't impaired, then we would do 100%, but if it is impaired, the Director of Public Works is going to decide to do some greater percentage. I am not going to put I do not want to put the Director of Public Works or me or the mayor or any of you in that position.
Just a quick response to that. I can understand that, but there are also other provisions mentioned in that code section, be it, I think it's steep slope, erodible areas, and a couple other factors, again, none of which have ever been considered, to my knowledge, by Public Works to require more. So it's not just water quality, that's the one that's most apparent and I think the most important to us, but there are other factors that should be considered, and again, the problem is I haven't seen Public Works consider that at all, so I'm telling myself, well, how do we get them to comply and adequately apply the law as we intend?
So, right. So I would go back to what we said in the staff report. If you want to do this, do it by ordinance and define those circumstances under which more than the 100 or the 150% would be what you want the Department of Public Works to require.
Alderwoman Henson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the decking is probably a fair comparison because it sounds like the same issue. The perception is that the administration used the very floor of what your standard is as the ceiling. That it was, we have not violated the code, and so because we haven't violated the code, we have served the public justice. But I think what the public has been saying to us is that not violating the code is your floor, not your ceiling. And so I think on this or on this resolution, it's a similar sentiment there, where this is the floor of what it's requiring with the standards that are in place. And what we are being asked to do by the public is to go beyond the floor and to establish a ceiling. So I think it's a fair comparison. I think also the perception with that analogy is that we were willing as a city to kind of be cavalier when it came to decking, but we're not willing as a city to have that same gusto for making sure we are enforcing our stormwater management regulations. So I think it's a fair comparison because I think it's the same kind of, but government isn't designed to be nimble. It's not designed to, so I understand what you're saying there, and the whole perception versus reality and opening the city up possibly for lawsuits, but I think if we have a process that's defensible, that I'm willing to stand behind it.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
You know, I think all of this discussion speaks to the point that Alderman Payon was making. Well, I don't think we're ready to vote on this. There's a motion on the floor to postpone action until the middle of October. Is that what I heard as the date?
Second meeting.
Second meeting in October. So I'd like to call that question.
And what committees is it going to go to? Alderwoman Tierney.
Has this been to, I think if, back to environmental, I mean, that's,
Mr.
I'm
Mayor, I
on
just called the
environmental.
question, I'm sorry.
Is it called a question?
She needs a second to call the question.
Was it
I'm
called a
sorry,
question?
I called the question.
Okay.
Oh, okay, on postponement?
So Alderman's Pound's postponement is on the floor. Has a second. All those in favour of postponing, say aye.
Mr. Ray, point of order, you have to vote on calling the question first.
Oh.
And that needs a supermajority to pass, and then you...
Oh, really? Ooh.
I'm sorry, Mr.
But I think we need clarification on the postponement.
All those in favour of calling the question, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
No.
Didn't get the majority, right? Okay. So Alderwoman Tierney.
All I want...
Roll call, please.
But I think we need clarification on the postponement, what committee, but
Okay.
it involves committee review, and we have to agree on what committees.
We just voted on calling the question, right? You needed a supermajority for that?
And
Okay, and you
I
want to do a
didn't-
roll call, right?
I asked for a roll call, please.
Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
No, I want clarification.
Alderman Leon?
Aye.
Alderman from Carrolls?
Aye.
Alderman from Latham?
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez?
No.
Alderman Henson?
No.
Alderman Savage?
No.
Alderman Arnett?
All right, more discussion.
Great. I'm sure we'll accomplish a lot.
Alderwoman Tierney.
I just think sending it back to environmental is like going into an echo chamber. So I just want constructive dialogue, and I don't know if this has been to public hearing, and I think public hearing would be a good venue to hear, what is the actual impact to developers, what is David, hear from David Jarrell. I think that is the only venue where we can hear those perspectives. I don't know if that would happen in committee.
So are you offering an
Alderman
amendment to the motion to have it go to a public hearing and then go to committee?
I
And then come,
I would suggest just public hearing. I don't think it needs committee review.
You
Point-
don't?
Point of order here. If I have my procedures
your
correct, any alderman can request a public hearing on a resolution. So, and we can vote, we can have a public hearing and a vote on a resolution the same night. So whenever this goes to committee, the next meeting following the committee hearings will go on the agenda for the council meeting, and then we could have a public hearing and the vote in the same night.
Well, actually,
Want it?
I don't think that's quite correct. You can do it, but normally what we like to have is public hearing before it goes to the committee, so the committee can take into consideration the comments of the public. So an appropriate sequence, it seems to me, would be to have a public hearing on this at the next council meeting, October 2nd, whatever, and then it go to committee or committees, and then come back to the council for a vote on the 22nd of October.
And would Fred have to amend his thing for that to happen?
Well, I think we've already had a call just now from Alderwoman Tierney for a public hearing. The appropriate time for that would be at the next council meeting. Then it can go to committee or committees, and then come back to the council for a vote.
Okay. Alderman Pound?
Look, it's not unprecedented to have a public hearing and take the vote on the same night. It's not something we like to do, but we've done it before, and I know that we usually have the public hearing. Do we usually have that before or after the committee? Before
the committee, that's
Yeah.
what I just said.
Well, we can
So
have
the
it.
committee can take advantage of what the public
We can have it
has said.
at our next meeting. I mean,
Right. So the clarified resolution would be that we postpone, we have a public hearing on this resolution at the first meeting in October. It go to whatever committees it's going to, and then come back for consideration on second reader at the meeting of October 22nd.
I certainly accept that. That's fine with me.
Okay.
Motion?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess that's my,
All I did was move to postpone.
Yeah, you just didn't go all the
Well,
way.
you just
Fred.
spelled it out, thank you. Let's take a vote on that. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
No.
You already voted.
I thought you said. Okay,
so did it pass?
is that it?
I think the ayes have it.
Couldn't believe it.
Seems like it.
All right. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The agenda has been completed, am I correct?
Yep.
Or is 39, let's see, is there supposed to have been 3918? What? That's a mistake? Okay. Yeah, the agenda has
Anything
been
else for
completed.
good order?
Thank you, Rob.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we adjourn.
Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.